What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and Marvel Comics has released a Marvel Rivals digital-only series. Now, the Infinity comics are shorter than your traditional comics, and you cannot buy them in a comic book store. This is a 6-issue series. It's one issue, or at least one release, every week for the next 5 weeks after the release of this one. And we will cover each of them. And so that's why this video is not as long as you would normally expect it to be on the channel. Now, what this does is this initially opens up with Galacta, the daughter of Galactus. Yes, she exists in Marvel Comics. Yes, it's weird. And yes, she's drawn totally differently than the way she looks in Marvel Rivals, for those of you guys who are interested in looking her up. She's not nearly as powerful as Galactus, and to say he's her father is kind of a loose association. She more just kind of like spawned from a kind of cosmic tapeworm of sorts within Galactus, and so she's not as powerful as he is, but she still is interesting in her own right. She's more of a protector than a consumer. Now, one of the downsides to the Marvel Rivals comic is it doesn't really do much in giving you as much lore as you would like regarding Marvel Rivals itself. Now, truth to tell, there really isn't a whole lot of lore, and there really won't be much expansion until we get to the release of the first huge event with Doctor Doom, and that's going to be amazing. I'm so excited for that. But the long and short of what's happening in Marvel Rivals is that all these different characters are essentially occupying the same space, but they all come from different realities. And the reason why is because Doctor Doom and his 2099 counterpart basically got into kind of a skirmish of sorts. And what they've done was effectively screwed up time to the point where like all these timelines are converging. And these are the various superheroes that we get out of it. And so what it does is it picks up or kind of switches over to Spider-Zero and the Master Weaver. Now, explanation time, because I know that there are people out there who have heard of the Master Weaver and don't know a whole lot about it, or know nothing about the Master Weaver and the Web of Life and Destiny. So Spider-Zero is a character that exists in Marvel Comics. The idea behind Spider-Zero is that she had come from a reality that had actually been destroyed during the incursions, the events that led into Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars 2015, and the whole incursion thing took place in Avengers and New Avengers. We do have that covered. It's the greatest comic book story ever written in the history of Marvel. But the Master Weaver and the Web of Life and Destiny is a little more complex than that. So while it did originate in the old Spider-Man video game, I think it was, back in, what was it, Shattered Dimensions or something like that, that it really achieved its highest level of significance during the Spider-Verse crossover event. So for the most part, when it comes to the multiverse in Marvel Comics, there's a whole bunch of ways in which it's represented, and these representations come in the form of like the Omniversal Development Court, whose job is to make sure that every universe has Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, that they all come into existence around the same time. If it doesn't happen in a universe, they initiate what's called the push, which basically jumpstarts the evolution of superheroes. That's where you got the character Jim Jaspers, where they did that after Jaspers killed everybody and almost destroyed the multiverse, but that's neither here nor there. You also have things like the M'Kraan Crystal, which is best represented as a hallway of doors, each door leading into the multiverse. And that hallway would be considered the White Hot Room, where the Phoenix Force resides in Marvel Comics. But then you also have the Web of Life and Destiny. Now, the Web of Life and Destiny is, again, a representation of the multiverse, but it only really deals directly with spider people. Any and everybody can be affected by it, right? It's simply just spider people are kind of what it pertains to. It was originally created by a character named Neith, who was what was called the first spider totem. And what that means in Marvel Comics is that where traditionally you and I and everybody else saw Spider-Man as just a kid bitten by a radioactive spider and gained the proportional strength of a spider, wall crawling, spider sense, and the list goes on and on and on. That during the runs of J. Michael Straczynski and Dan Slott, what we learned is that when Peter was bitten by a radioactive spider, it kind of tied him into the mystical nature of spider totems. And what that means is that with the Web of Life and Destiny, everybody who is bitten by a spider was destined to be bitten by one, more often than not. And so what that means is that by being tied into the Web of Life and Destiny, in the same way that Yoda told Luke Skywalker, the Force is all around us and binds us, the Web and Life of Destiny is the same way. So you could cut off a singular spider from the Web of Life and Destiny, and they're literally removed from being able to access the other universes of Spider-Man, potentially even using their powers. But on a bigger level than that, across the entire multiverse, you have very select groups of individuals that serve a particular purpose. Now, the purpose they serve is relative to whoever it is that's writing the story. So Marvel plays it very fast and loose. But for example, Cindy Moon, right? Those of you guys remember her as a post-credit scene from Spider-Man 2. She's the bride. Right? She is a person who was bitten by a radioactive spider after Spider-Man, and in fact, the same spider that bit him bit her. The character of Kane is what's called the Other. He literally turns into a giant spider. There's a character named Benji, who I think was the Scion, and the list goes on. But there's only one bride, one Scion, one pattern maker, and one master weaver among the other roles in the entirety of the multiverse. That's why Spider-Verse was such a big event, because the Inheritors were running through the multiverse, killing every version of Spider-Man they could find, and Spider-Woman even, trying to find these individual totems and then destroying them, which would effectively lead to the complete dissolution of the Web of Life and Destiny. So I told you that it's really got some meat and potatoes to it, and there's a little more to the Web of Life and Destiny than that. But the idea behind this is that with everything going on in the timeline and the significance of the Master Weaver, in the sense that if he dies, that the Web of Life and Destiny could potentially fall apart. There's no one to maintain it and to ensure that all the spider people are held together through the Web of Life and Destiny being organized, structured, and held together, that the idea of Spider Zero is to say, we simply need to turn you into a digital construct and put you in the digital space. Because if something were to happen here and you were killed, that would be the end of it. But if we digitize you, well, then you can never truly be destroyed, right? You can always come back in some form or fashion. And so as a result of that, it kind of picks up with the existing mythos where you have Venom and Spider-Man teaming up and talking about the nature of infinite timelines, right? That's why you kind of have them going back and forth, and Venom saying things like, I have not missed your jokes. And Spider-Man asks things like, has your universe of Spider-Man moved on from comedy to more dramatic roles? Because my agent's been bugging me to do the same thing. And Venom says, my Spider-Man is dead. Do you want to see how I killed him? Now, again, as far as we're aware, and I could be wrong here, we don't really know the ins and outs of the individual universes that these characters come from. I could be wrong, so I'm not going to swear by that. And if I am, make sure I know down in the comment section. I mean, you will. You guys love pointing out when I'm wrong. But let me know down in the comment section. Of course, that moves on to the fight between Wolverine and Thor. As you guys will notice here, that Thor is smiting Wolverine. The reason why is because in my experience, every time Thor tries to smite Punisher, he just gets sprayed down to the ground because Thor's a noob. And then, of course, Wolverine is, holding his own as best he can. But again, you kind of have this back and forth, right? Where it just sort of picks up with what you've experienced in the game and what you would expect to see in the comic. And so that's why Spider-Man is saying things like, Venom, tell me what the whole story is behind me dying and all that kind of stuff in your particular reality. But there are some cool little moments that do offer, or at least beg, some measure of explanation. For example, Captain America telling Namor the Submariner, we fought together in World War II. We could be allies again. Now, that did happen in Marvel Comics. It was actually a group called the Invaders. And in fact, during Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America, when he brought Bucky Barnes back in the whole Winter Soldier story arc, there was actually a big change to that mythos. Instead of Bucky Barnes being a kid who just stumbled into the tent of Captain America and discovered Steve Rogers was turning into Captain America and begged him to join him on his adventures, otherwise Bucky would tell people Captain America's true identity, that it actually turned out Bucky was a highly trained assassin. He was a child soldier. Captain America didn't agree with it, but ultimately Captain America went along with it because his moral code is relative to whatever he wants his goal to be at the time. Now, of course, Namor was a part of the Invaders as well, kind of a callback to the old Captain America, Namor the Submariner, and even Human Torch Jim Hammond comics during World War II. Kind of a fun fact, Namor and Jim Hammond predated Captain America in Marvel. Now, of course, that also goes into Luna Snow, who makes an appearance here, where she kind of banters a little bit with Venom and Bruce Banner and Spider-Man. Now, Luna Snow is wholly new to Marvel Rivals. She does not exist in Marvel Comics. So those of you guys who have been asking for a Luna Snow comic book origin, like Jeff the Land Shark or something like that, it doesn't exist, not to my knowledge. Now, it could be that Luna is heavily based on another character from Marvel, but I'm not aware that she is, right? As far as I know, she's wholly new for the entire franchise. Then, of course, this picks up with Iron Fist going toe-to-toe with Doctor Strange. Now, this is where we get our first indication that the comic book is not really entirely accurate relative to the game, because you and I both know that all you would need is Iron Fist here, because Iron Fist is ridiculously overpowered and the developers don't have enough common sense to nerf him. And so, of course, he tells Doctor Strange, to focus his chi and that kind of a thing. But again, it's just kind of a battle royale, right? It's all these characters facing off against each other. Now, one person you're not going to see here is you're not going to see Punisher, and you're not going to see Rocket along with a few others. Cloak and Dagger, you won't really see them either. In fact, again, this is the first issue. It's just kind of giving us a little bit of information regarding the nature of the Marvel Rivals comic and how all this kind of ties into it. Now, of course, that switches over to Peni Parker. Now, Peni Parker is a really cool character in the Spider-Man mythos. And in fact, she debuted in Edge of Spider-Verse #5. And Edge of Spider-Verse was actually a limited comic book series that gave you all these origin stories for these different versions of Spider-Man across the multiverse. It wasn't all of them, but it was a good chunk of them. The most interesting was some of those Spider-Men went on to become part of Spider-Verse. Some of them actually died or were consumed by the Inheritors within the Edge of Spider-Verse story, and they were never seen or heard from again. Peni Parker came from a reality where her father, whose identity is never revealed, ended up piloting what was called the Spider Suit. Now, from my perspective, the Spider Suit functioned more like the Jaegers from Pacific Rim, where instead of quote-unquote drifting with another person, that Penny would drift with the spider. But as I understand it, because the whole reality of Peni Parker is based more on anime and manga, a lot of fans that I've talked to have drawn these parallels between like Neon Genesis and Spider-Man to kind of bridge the gap and understanding how Peni Parker's suit and everything works. Your mileage may vary on which one you choose to pick, but the long and short of it is that when Peni Parker became the pilot of the spider suit, she was bitten by the radioactive spider that was the other half of the suit. So it's really more like two minds that control this whole thing. But again, in Peni Parker's reality, we don't know that her father's name is Peter Parker. And again, I'm fairly certain that Marvel has never actually divulged the name of her father. And so that's why when she's talking to Peter and she asks, like, do you have a daughter named Penny in your timeline? He's like, no, not really. And she's like, okay, I'm just checking. And she says, and by the way, this Venom is lost in the time stream with no memory of his previous life. So he was totally lying about that killing Spider-Man thing. And where Peter's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, that's comforting, but like, aren't we supposed to be fighting each other? Penny's like, yes, we're totally supposed to be fighting each other. And like, they go back into a fight with each other. Which I absolutely love. Now this goes into like a Captain America Thor team up, because when Thor's fighting Wolverine, Captain America throws his shield down there, and Thor's lightning goes from Captain America's shield, which seemingly amplifies the power of Thor's lightning, which basically electrocutes Wolverine. And of course, Wolverine having a healing factor, which varying degrees of how fast he can heal in Marvel Comics, he'll come back pretty quickly. But that's where the comic starts to borrow elements from the game. Because Penny's like, okay, if Captain America and Thor can share power, then can anybody else share power? And that goes into the symbiote maneuver between Spider-Man, Peni Parker, any of the Spider characters, and Venom, right? Where she literally gets the ability to create a wall of symbiote spikes. And anybody who touches them ends up getting 50 points of damage received upon their visage. That was an unnecessary way of saying, like, you lose 50 points of life. Now again, of course, Peni Parker going on a rampage with her huge power-up ends up blowing up this building in Tokyo 2099. And Spider-Man and his entire team are trapped under there. Now the cool thing about this is that what it's going to do is it's going to give us this pretty quick idea of who's on which teams. And where Penny's initial idea is like, well, I mean, we should save them, we should help them and rescue them. The response of Banner is, no, we shouldn't either, right? Like fixing the timeline is really the most important thing. If we really want to help them, we'll get the timeline back to the way that it's supposed to be. Everybody will return home, and that'll be that. And so Penny's just kind of like, you know what, you're right? Like Spider-Zero put me in charge. That's a great idea. We're going to do that. And she has this hilarious line where she was like, okay, here's the new plan, team. We are not going to help them. You'll be okay, Spider-Man. I know you will. We'll fix the timeline and then everybody will be okay. And in kind of like this almost sort of campy but like amazing moment, Spider-Man's hand just like emerges from the rubble like he's Jason coming out of Crystal Lake. And that's where the comic ends. But again, it's a cute, fun little comic. The Infinity comics always were, right? They weren't like great, big, huge, grandiose things. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Do you want me to cover the one for next week when it comes out? And I will catch you all later. Peace.